When I used to go on a long trip with my kids when they were young, invariably, it wasn't very long before one of them would say, "Are we there yet?" Well, right now, with everything that we see happening in the world, it just seems like there's so many misfortunes and different catastrophes happening simultaneously. Frequently here at Amazing Facts, we're getting the question, are these the last plagues? Now, you can understand why someone might ask that question, because there are some devastating things that are happening around the world. Let's just take a look of some of the events that are happening. First of all, Jesus said in the last days in Matthew 24, there would be pestilence. Well, most of us know about the coronavirus. Some are wondering, is this going to rise to the same level as the Spanish flu in 1918, where somewhere between 30 and 40 million people died? The fact is that today, with international travel and people getting on airplanes together, it's very quick seeing one of these viruses spread globally, especially if it's got a slow gestation period before it's made visible. Many thousands of people have already died from this plague, and it's being found in different countries. They're trying to get that under control, but catastrophic economic fallout from this plague. It's just about put the country of China in lockdown economically. I just came back from Australia. So much of their tourism is the Chinese tourists. And so 20-25% of the tourism, the purchasing that goes on, the travel that goes on, is impacting several countries. And so if for no other reason, the coronavirus is having some global economic impact. We'll have to just wait and see how it continues to unfold on the medical level. But that's not the only virus. There are still some other deadly viruses that are still going around out there. You still got the H1N1 swine flu. Right now, for instance, 13 people just died in Taiwan. So you've got the viruses that are taking human life. Now there's a whole raft of viruses that are taking animal life. I think in the last 40 years, National Geographic says about 50% of the world's species have disappeared. But look at this, they've got the African swine fever. Now this is so far not transmittable to humans, but they're having an epidemic among the population of pigs in the world. 25% of all domestic pigs in the world have died in the last couple of years. 25%. And of all the pigs that are in China, 60 million pigs in China have died from this virus. And they're very concerned now that it's as they discover there are different pig farms that are infected, they're not even waiting for the pigs to die. They're killing them off, and there are rivers that are running with blood from these pigs that are being culled in Indonesia and China, and they're worried that that may even spread it more. This African fever outbreak in China has increased the price of pork about 600%. And so again, what's happening in the animal kingdom is affecting the economics of the world. It's not only the pig swine fever, the African swine fever, then they've got the H5N1 bird flu. This strain of the bird flu, so far is just affecting birds, is killing thousands of chickens in different parts of the world. And in China also, they're really getting hit hard. Now, as you're looking at the pigs dying off in China and the coronavirus in China and the bird flu in China, it's rocking the country economically. Some people are saying, why is this happening? And I've heard some speculation that's caused me to pause. 2 years ago, China began to really crack down on Christians once again, closing churches, saying they're going to create a new government translation of the Bible. And Amazing Facts was in China doing public evangelism in 2014. It's a whole different leadership now that is cracking down on the public broadcast of the gospel, shutting down Christian websites, forbidding the purchase of Bibles from outside the country. And so you just wonder if the Lord is just withdrawing some blessing there because of what they're doing. Then you've got the locust invasion. And it's fun to hear the news continue to say, this plague of biblical proportions, apocalyptic proportions. So they keep incorporating biblical language to try to explain or describe this armies of locusts that are sweeping across cities in Africa, decimating farms in just a matter of seconds. Billions and billions of locusts that are just darkening the skies. It's like what you see described, the plague that hit Egypt in the days of Israel. And some are wondering, is this describing that plague of millions of locusts that you find in Revelation? No, I think that chapter in the Bible is talking about the spread of Islam during the Dark Ages. But yeah, there are plagues of locusts, and the locusts are not only going through Africa, they're also reaching into China as well. Then you got the extremely bizarre weather patterns that are happening. And it's like all rules are being thrown out the window. California had some of the most devastating fires in its history a couple of years ago. Not only did hundreds die in the Paradise Fire, but that same year they had the fire in Mendocino County, burnt about 500,000 acres. It was the largest fire in California's history as far as acreage burned. I actually could see it burning from our house. They had the first time they recorded a 209-mile-an-hour wind in California with a storm that went through. And then you've got burning in Australia. We just came back from Australia. They had 50.3 million acres burned this last few months in Australia. By the end of January, the fires started going out, and then they had floods, massive flooding in the Gold Coast, in Sydney. 150,000 homes were without power. And here in California now, when the wind blows, you have millions of people that have no power because they're afraid of fires like the Paradise Fire. It's amazing. California is starting to be like a third world country. People running to the stores for generators and lining up for gas because there's no power because the wind is blowing. Who would have ever thunk? And storms, as of this recording, they're having record floods in Mississippi, Jackson floods. They say it's some of the highest, unprecedented are the words being used. And this is happening around the world, in Europe and different places. Earthquakes and volcanoes. Back in January, I think they had the Tal volcano blew up. Near that volcano in Manila, there are about 25 million people that live there. Then there was the Mount Merapi volcano in Indonesia. Recently blew up a few days ago. They're kind of popping up around the world. The volcanoes seem to become more active. Things are happening a lot seismically. They just had an earthquake off of Cuba, 7.1, that was felt all the way into Florida. Miami doesn't have earthquakes, but they felt this earthquake shake in Miami. And that's unusual because I used to live there. We never, ever felt an earthquake when we were there. And then in Puerto Rico just had a whole rash of earthquakes, one after the other. And they've still not recovered from the hurricanes. And so you see things happening as far as natural disasters. And then on the religious front, the Protestants and Catholics continue to march towards this unity that we believe prophecy is going to describe. Right now, I've read that the Protestants, for the first time, are looking at partaking in a Catholic communion, and they're going to do this in the church of John Calvin in Geneva, which was one of the landmark churches, along with the Wittenberg Church there in Germany, for the Protestant Reformation. In that church of Calvin's, they plan on having Protestants partake of Catholic communion. One of the reasons for the Protestant Reformation was what they were protesting against, transubstantiation, what the Catholics were doing during the Mass. They thought that it was blasphemous to say the priest had the power to create the body and the blood of Jesus. This was a great theological debate. Well, people are throwing theology out the window, and unless the Pope steps in to stop it, and that's happened before, where popes have stepped in and stopped non-Protestants from participating in a Catholic Mass. This goes against their theology, but doesn't look like Pope Francis thus far is going to prevent that from happening. So that will be another first. And in this, what's happening with the compromise and the joining together of Protestants and Catholics and the ecumenism that seems to be paving the way for, Christians uniting, building a confederacy that will help protect them against the spread of Islam, as some are thinking. Then you've got incredible political division in the world right now between conservatives and liberals, Democrats and Republicans. It's not just North America. I don't know in my lifetime ever seen things so divided, but you have it in England with the recent Brexit. Just returned from Australia, incredible political division. Families are being divided, brother against brother. It's like the Civil War, the North against the South. And this is one of the signs. In the last days, it says the love of many will grow cold. And so folks are saying, Pastor Doug, is this it? Are we seeing the last plagues? Well, I think what you're seeing is the whole creation is groaning and travailing. You know, one of the plagues, I think it's the fourth plague, it says that men will be scorched with great heat. And everywhere I go, people are now talking about global warming. So I get messages and folks are asking, Pastor Doug, is this one of those plagues, men being scorched with great heat? Well, I don't think that's what the Bible's talking about. It talks about them gnawing their tongues with pain because of this great heat. So I think that's going to be something much more intense than what we're seeing today. When wickedness abounds, you seem to see it reflected in nature itself. When Christ was on the cross, the skies grew dark. And so I do think we're seeing the approach of the final events. One more thing I'll just throw in there. Someone, I remember they emailed me not long ago. They said, is it true the Euphrates River is drying up? And yes, it is true. I don't think that's what it's talking about there in Revelation. I think that's more of a spiritual fulfillment, but it is very interesting that Iran and Turkey are creating so many dams and soaking up all the water that runs into the Tigris and Euphrates rivers that Iraq is having a tremendous famine. And downstream in Iraq, where they used to have boats navigating the Euphrates, in the Bible it's called the Great Euphrates. Now you can walk across it. And so the Euphrates is literally drying up. But some are saying, well, maybe that prophecy's got a spiritual and a literal fulfillment. I don't know. Do I think we're getting close to the second coming? Yes. I see final events are unfolding. No, I do not think we're seeing the 7 last plagues. When that happens, probation closes.